Ancient Earth Stories. Uncovering legends etched in stone.
Have you ever stood at the edge of a field just after sunset, when the wind stills and the sky becomes the color of forgotten silver? Have you felt the hush then? Not quiet, but something deeper, as though the land itself is listening. There are places where stories breathe through the roots, where old stones are not just stones, and where the air thickens with memory. Ireland has many names for these places, but none are spoken lightly, for there are rings in the earth that do not belong to us. And once, in the mists of Kerry, not far from the sea but hidden from the roads, there was a ring beneath the heather. A perfect circle of stone half sunk in moss, the grass inside it shorter, the wind always still. Children were told not to enter it, not to touch it, not to speak near it, but children are born with wildness in their blood, and Saoirse was no different. She was the blacksmith's daughter, her hair like burnt gold, her hands always scraped from climbing trees. She did not believe in tales, though her grandmother whispered them like prayers at the hearth. When Saoirse laughed, she laughed loudly, and when she danced like someone who did not know the meaning of fear. One evening, as twilight pooled like ink between the stones, she came to the ring. The sun was nearly gone, and the heather smelled of warm earth. A dare from her brother, a grin on her face. She stepped in just one step, then another. She spun, the wind held its breath. The crows stilled in the trees, and the circle, that ancient hush in the hill, opened, not outward, but inward, as though time was not a line, but a spiral. Saoirse blinked. The sky above her shimmered like light on deep water. The world no longer smelled of heather, but of something older, silver, stone, and sweet decay. The trees were taller now. The grass hummed, and then they came, not as people do with footsteps or greetings, but as flickers of light, threads of music, the memory of laughter wrapped in shadow. They had no need for names, but they were the fair folk, as old as rain, as quiet as frost, not cruel, not kind, simply bound by laws too old to change. One stepped forward, tall, pale, eyes like still lakes, and though no words were spoken, Saoirse understood. She was the guest. But every guest brings something, and every guest leaves something behind. They danced, not as children do, nor as lovers, but in patterns that shaped the air, that echoed in the bones. Her heart beat in time with drums that had not sounded in 1,000 years. She laughed, and the circle shimmered, but laughter is a promise in their world, a thread tied to fate. And Saoirse, who had danced without knowing the cost, began to fade. Not her body, but something deeper. The echo of her, the part that remembered the warmth of bread and the voice of her mother. She felt it slipping like mist through her fingers, and still she danced until one of them, the one with the lake eyes, touched her brow, and the dance stopped. A choice, not given but implied. Stay and forget, or leave and remember. She chose the wind, the taste of rain, the memory of her brother's hand. And so she woke, on the edge of the ring, the dawn rising soft and gold, the heather damp with dew. Her hands were stained with earth, her hair full of dried leaves that did not grow nearby. She never spoke of it. Not to her family, not to the priest, only to her grandmother, who listened with eyes like candlelight. "You danced in the ring," the old woman said, and kissed her forehead. "Then be grateful you remember your name." But something was gone. She could no longer laugh as she had. The birds no longer startled at her step, and once, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a flicker of herself still dancing in the reflection, smiling with eyes not her own. Years passed. Saoirse grew quiet. She planted herbs. She walked at dusk. She became the sort of woman others turned to when the wind changed direction, or cows refused to cross the stream. She never returned to the ring, but sometimes, late at night, the circle glowed faintly in the hills, seen only by foxes and those who remembered how to look sideways at the world. And though she had left them, she knew she had given something,
And they had taken something, not in malice.
not in kindness, but in balance. Now and then, a child would ask her, "What's in that ring on the hill?" She would smile gently. "Only stories," she would say. But stories are alive, and they remember who listens. And when Saoirse passed, they say the winds in Kerry shifted slightly. The trees leaned, and the circle was quiet for a long, long time, but still it waits.
In the mist.
Beneath the heather. For another name, another step, another dance, but the mists hold another tale. Have you ever heard hooves in the night, when there is no road nearby? A sound not of horse, but of warning. A gallop that does not echo, yet presses against your ribs with each beat. Have you felt it? That moment between breath and shadow? When something unseen turns its gaze toward you? Some say death is silent. Others know better. In the old lands of Connaught, where the trees stand hunched with age and peat, smoke curls low through the bogs, there is a path no one walks after sundown, not for fear of wolves nor men, but for the Dullahan, the headless rider who sees without seeing, who names without speaking, who comes when the thread has thinned to nothing. This tale begins near such a path, in a village pressed into the damp earth like a fingerprint forgotten by time. Aidan lived there, small for his age, always listening. He did not speak much, not because he couldn't, but because he heard things others didn't. The drip of water beneath walls, the sigh of old doors, and once the sound of a voice that wasn't a voice, whispering through the rushes at dusk. Aidan's grandmother, Nora, knew stories. She called them memory, not myth, and when she spoke, her voice was rough like wool, soaked in winter. "There's a rider," she said one night, her eyes on the fire but seeing beyond it. "He holds his own head in his hands."
And when he stops, someone's time is done. Does he speak? Aidan asked. No, she said.
"But still you'll know when he's come for you. He didn't ask how. Some things, even as a child, he already knew." One evening, the bog lit gold with low sun. Aidan wandered farther than usual. The air hung heavy, each step thick as honey. He came to the edge of the old path, that narrow, overgrown ribbon between two fields.
A sound stopped him.
A breath not his own. Then the unmistakable rhythm, hooves not near.
Not far, just
Present, like a heartbeat belonging to the land itself. Aidan stood still. The trees leaned in.
And then he saw him. The Dullahan did not gallop. He glided.
A black horse, slick with dew and shadow, eyes burning like cold lanterns. The rider wore armour that shimmered like fish scale in moonlight, and in his left hand, dangling low like a lantern of flesh, was his head. The face was smiling.
Not cruel, not kind. Only certain he did not stop.
He did not slow. But as he passed, he turned, or the head turned, and Aidan felt something inside him marked, as though written upon with a finger made of wind. He did not run. He did not cry. He simply turned back the way he'd come, every step lighter, as if the path itself no longer wished to hold him. That night, he dreamt of a bell tolling under water, and when he woke, Nora was gone, no illness.
No warning.
Just gone, her bed undisturbed, a small sprig of bog myrtle placed where her heart had been. The villagers said she had gone peacefully, a blessing. But Aidan knew the truth. The rider had not come for him. Not yet. He had come for her. Days passed.
Then weeks.
Aidan returned to the edge of that path again and again, drawn to it not with fear, but reverence. Then came the night of the harvest moon, bright Amber, full as a promise, Aidan stood in the field as the wind whispered through the stalks, and there he was again, the Dullahan. This time he stopped. The horse did not snort. The grass did not bend. Even the insects held their breath. The rider raised his hand, not to beckon, but to offer, in it something small, wrapped in linen.
Aidan stepped forward, trembling. He took it.
Unwrapped it, a bell, tiny, black, cold. The moment he touched it, he understood. This was not death.
Not a curse.
But a legacy. The Dullahan had seen him. He had been marked, but not to be taken, to be entrusted, and, slowly, Aidan began to change. He heard the moments before people passed, not as words, but as shifts in the air. He began to know when sorrow was near, and once, when an old woman clutched his hand in her final breath, he felt peace pass through her like light through stained glass. The villagers did not question. Some called him strange.
Others brought him offerings.
No one ever asked about the bell. But every year, on the harvest moon, Aidan stood in the field, and the Dullahan passed,
Sometimes nodding,
sometimes silent.
always watching. Years turned like pages. Aidan grew, then grew old.
He never left the village.
Never married, never feared. When his time came, for all time comes, he lay in his bed, eyes open to the moon, and he heard it.
The hooves, soft, sure, he smiled, and placed the bell beneath his pillow. They say, when they found him, there was no sign of struggle.
Only a strange peace in the room.
And outside in the field, the grass bent in the shape of hooves, but only for a moment. No one knows where the bell went. But sometimes, just before a storm, you might hear a faint chime in the wind. Not loud,
Not sharp.
but certain, and if you do, hush your heart. It is not a thing to fear. It is only the sound of the world remembering. And further still, there is one more story.
Have you ever knelt beside water so still that it feels like it's listening? Not reflecting, but remembering.
Have you felt the hush that gathers near wells, where wishes once spoken are now moss-covered echoes? In the soft shadow of the Wicklow hills, veiled in mist and wrapped in green, there is such a well. Its water is cold as bone and clear as truth.
No sign marks its presence. No road leads to it.
Only those who carry questions in their chests find their feet turning toward it. It is said the well remembers, but it does not answer every question.
Only the one that lies beneath all others. Bridget knew this place not by name, but by dream.
She was a widow, though her face still held the softness of someone who once smiled often. Her grief had settled not loud, but low, like a fog that thickens with every breath. They had buried Cian in the churchyard above the cliffs, and for a while she sat beside his stone each dawn. But stones do not speak back, and prayers, when said too often, begin to hollow the tongue. One evening the light was slow to leave. Bridget walked without meaning to, following a path that was not a path, only a thinning in the grass, a leaning of the trees. Her feet, bare and silent, followed the hush. It was nearly dark when she found it, a ring of flat stones soft with lichen. The air smelled of iron and ash leaves, and in the centre, the well, not large.
Not deep, but very, very still. She knelt.
Not out of reverence but instinct, as though the earth asked her to lower her heart. The water mirrored nothing, no stars, no face, just darkness, the kind that listens. She whispered his name, Cian, and the well replied, not in voice, but in a sudden chill that brushed her skin, like a memory brushing past. Then a shimmer. She leaned closer. There, beneath the surface, not touching, but waiting, a face. Not his.
Not hers, but something between. The eyes were not eyes.
They were moments. She saw Cian's laughter folded into the corners. She saw their wedding night, candlelight trembling on the walls. She saw the day she'd asked him not to go fishing, and the day he had gone anyway. She saw his boat, empty, and her breath breaking. Tears blurred the water. But when she blinked them away, the face was gone. In its place, only herself. Changed. Brigid did not speak for some time. The well made no further sound. But when she rose, the air seemed to lift slightly.
As if something old had exhaled, she returned home, lit a candle,
Brewed tea, and did not weep that night. The next morning, she walked to the market. Her steps were light, her hands empty. She smiled at the baker's daughter and bought flour she did not need. She had forgotten nothing, and yet everything was different. Words spread in quiet circles. The widow who smiled, the woman whose voice no longer cracked when she said her husband's name. Some thought her mad, some thought her healed. She offered no answer. Only, when asked about her peace, she would say softly, "I listened long enough for the well to speak." The years passed. Children came to her for stories. She told none. But she would guide them sometimes to the edge of the forest, where the path was not a path, and she would say, "If the water calls to you, listen with your silence." And then she would leave them. Some heard nothing,
Others heard too much.
but all came back changed. When Brigid's time came, no priest was called, no bell was rung. She lay in her garden, watching the wind through the holly trees. And they say, though no one knows who first said it, that on the morning of her burial, the well overflowed. Just once, clear water spilled over the moss stones, and when it dried, a single lark sang above the forest. No one speaks its name now, but still sometimes footsteps find it, and the water, when it listens, always waits for the truest question, the one you didn't know you were carrying. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever placed your ear against a stone and waited, not for sound, but for stillness? Have you felt the patience of rocks, the way they cradle centuries without speaking?
And if they did speak,
Would we know how to listen? In the folds of County Clare, where the hills rise like ancient backs beneath woolen skies, there are stones older than belief. Some lean in circles worn by wind, some lie half-buried, sleeping, and some stand alone, tall and marked with lines that no one reads anymore. They say the earth remembers every footstep, but the stones remember voices. In a village tucked between limestone ridges lived a boy called Ian. He was a quiet child, with eyes too wide for comfort and a habit of pressing his palms to stone walls as if they were doorways. He did not babble like the others. He listened. The others thought him slow. The priest called him touched. But his grandmother, who mended things with string and silence, called him gifted. "Stones speak to those who have forgotten how to lie," she would say, tying herbs above the hearth. Eowyn wandered the hills alone, barefoot even in frost. He would sit for hours at old ringforts, cairns and dolmens, head tilted, lips parted, as though drinking silence. Once his mother followed him, hidden in shadow, and saw him lay his cheek against a tall stone. He whispered something, then nodded as if someone had answered. When she asked what he'd said, he only replied, she was lonely. No one pressed further. There was one stone he returned to most, standing alone on a hill where sheep refused to graze. It was taller than a man, dark with lichens, and humming faintly if you pressed your ear just right. They called it Cloch na Cuimen, the stone of memory. Ian called it her. He began to change, not outwardly, but inwardly, as though the stones had filled him with their weight. He no longer flinched at thunder. He walked through storm and sun as if both were equal. And when old Seamus died, Ian visited the grave and stood still until the crows stopped cawing. Later, the widow said she dreamed of her husband smiling, standing in the stone circle where they'd first kissed. She woke with no tears. They began to whisper, not cruelly, not kindly, just cautiously. They brought him small stones to touch, asking questions with their eyes. He would hold each one, close his eyes and say a name, or nothing at all. When the rains came hard and the river swelled, it was Ian who stood beside the old bridge and touched the keystone. Afterward, the waters calmed. No one thanked him, but none doubted. Then came the winter, when the ground did not freeze, the trees did not sleep, and people dreamed of doors opening in the hills. Ian vanished. One morning, his boots were found beside Cloch na Cuimne, his coat folded neatly.
No sign of struggle, no note.
Only a circle of small stones placed around the base of the standing stone, each marked with a single red line, drawn in earth. They searched, they prayed, they waited, but he did not return. Some say he was taken.
Others believe he stepped into the stone,
or into the story the stone had waited to tell. His grandmother wept once, then baked bread. She told the neighbours he's not gone. He is only listening deeper now. In time the tale became quiet. Another mystery folded into the hills, but every summer solstice without fail, the air hums around Cloch na Cuimne. If you press your ear to its face, you may hear a heartbeat.
or laughter.
Or a boy's voice whispering, "Shh, she's about to say something." They say Ian speaks through the stone now.
Not always. Only when needed, and if the land is in sorrow, if someone forgets who they are, they walk barefoot up the hill alone.
And listen, no miracles are promised, but sometimes the air becomes still in a way that feels like memory. And sometimes a person descends the hill, smiling quietly. The stones do not promise answers.
Only presence, only patience, only truth. And if you feel a hum beneath your feet, know this: the world beneath us is always speaking.
You need only silence yourself long enough to hear, and the shadow grows deeper still, for the tale is not yet complete. Have you ever felt a tree watching you? Not with eyes, but with something older, something rooted in silence and breath. A presence that waits at the edge of seeing, where light and shadow fold like soft wings. There is a hawthorn tree, alone on the border of an ancient pasture in Tipperary. It is neither tall nor grand, yet it carries weight no oak could bear. A tree that never blooms in spring, but is never barren either. Its branches twist like fingers guarding secrets. Its roots dig deep into earth, soaked with memory. They call it the threshold tree, for it marks a boundary between worlds, between the known and the unseen, between the living and what waits quietly beneath the veil. Beneath this tree lived Maeve, a midwife whose hands were said to hold the song of the other world. Her hair was silver before its time, and her eyes held the hush of places not meant for daylight. People came to her when the night was thick, and newborns cried with the breath of something ancient. Maeve spoke little, but when she did, her voice was soft like moss, and it carried a weight beyond words. She knew stories older than the church's stones. She knew how to open the veil, how to walk between worlds without losing herself. When the famine came, it hollowed the land like a dark wind through the grass.
Hunger gnawed at bones.
Hope thinned like bark peeling from branches, and despair grew heavy in the eyes of the living. Maeve moved through the village, a quiet shadow, a bearer of relief and warning. She held hands, whispered prayers, and sometimes, when the world tipped too far, she made choices no human should bear. One bitter night, a woman's breath faltered in Maeve's arms. The child would not live. The mother begged for a miracle. Maeve closed her eyes and listened, not to words, but to the silence between heartbeats. The threshold tree stood bare against the cold sky. Maeve walked to it, her steps silent as snowfall. She laid her palm against the bark, feeling its pulse, slow, steady, and dark. And then she spoke, not aloud, but with something older. A prayer woven from shadow and light. The tree shivered. Its branches bent low, and the air thickened with unseen breath. When Maeve returned, the child was gone, but the mother lived. No one asked what Maeve had done. No one spoke of the bargain made beneath the hawthorn's limbs. Birds stopped nesting in the threshold tree. The village dogs howled when near it. The grass around it grew dark as night, and no blade dared bloom. Maeve became a woman apart, both feared and needed. She carried sorrow deep in her bones, wrapped in silence like a cloak. Yet those she touched were said to live long or not at all. One evening, Maeve vanished. No note, no farewell. Only a single hawthorn blossom laid at the village gate, fresh and untouched by frost. The threshold tree stands still, guarding its secrets, waiting. Some say Maeve walks beneath its branches, neither fully here nor gone. Others say the tree took her in payment for a price too high to name, and sometimes, when the wind is thin and the moon a sliver, a woman's voice can be heard, soft and humming, like a lullaby from another world. They say to harm the tree is to call ruin. To break the veil is to lose the way home. Some come seeking Maeve's blessing,
Others forgiveness.
but all leave with the weight of silence heavy in their hearts. The threshold tree bears no fruit, it bears memory, and beneath its watchful boughs the unseen waits, patient and eternal. But in the hush of twilight there is one last story left to tell. Have you ever stood before a hill that breathes beneath your feet? Not with wind or birdsong, but with silence so deep it feels like waiting, as if the earth itself holds its breath for a secret yet to be told. Have you heard the soft hum of stone, older than words, older than memory? In Meath there is such a hill, a hollow, shaped like a beast lying in eternal sleep. No one knows how long it has stood, but it is older than the kings who once ruled the land. It holds chambers carved from earth and light, places where the sun slips like a quiet blessing once a year, and only then. This hill remembers the first voices, the builders of shadow and silence. It keeps the echoes of footsteps long vanished beneath its soil, and it waits. A monk named Colum came here long ago, seeking wisdom in a time when the world was still young with fear and hope. He walked the green paths winding toward the hill, his breath slow with prayer, his heart open to the unseen. They say Colum was not like others. He could hear the song of wind through the grass, the stories whispered by leaves falling in autumn. He carried faith like a lantern, but also curiosity, a hunger to know the world beyond Scripture. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he entered the hill's shadow. Inside the chambers, the air was cool and still, the silence of stone waiting. Then he heard it.
A voice, clear and pure, singing in a tongue older than stars. He followed the sound deeper until he saw her, a woman bathed in light that seemed to come from the earth itself.
Her hair flowed like river water, her eyes the color of twilight. She sang not with words, but with breath and light, weaving a melody that touched something forgotten in his soul. Colum reached out, but she was not flesh nor spirit. She was the earth, speaking through a woman's form, the memory of a promise made long ago between sky and stone. He fell to his knees, listening to the song that held both sorrow and hope. When she vanished, he was left with a silence that hummed inside his chest. He returned to the village, changed, no longer just a man of prayer, but a keeper of a secret older than faith. Some say the woman still sings beneath the hill, waiting for those who will listen. Others say Colum never truly left the hill, that his spirit walks its paths even now. When the sun rises on the day the chambers glow, those who watch the hill see a light not born of fire or star. It is said that on this day the veil between worlds thins, and those who are lost may find their way home. And sometimes, when the night is deep and the wind has fallen silent, you can hear a song, not sung but remembered, a song of earth and shadow, promise and waiting. The hill waits still, patient, silent, unseen. For the story does not end here. The hill still waits beneath stars that do not forget.